8 blocks, in broad daylight, no witnesses, no trace. How does someone vanish in the middle of a Nebraska neighborhood, without a single sound? Before we continue, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this story, and subscribe if you believe every missing person deserves to be found. And don't forget to hit the notification bell for the next true crime story on Crime Case Voices. The morning of June 13th, 2001, began like any other in Omaha, Nebraska. The sun was already rising, casting a soft light across the quiet streets of the Benson neighborhood, a place where life moved at a gentle, predictable pace. Jason Jolkowski, a 19-year-old college student, was getting ready to head into work. He'd been called in for a short shift at Fazoli's, the fast-casual Italian restaurant where he worked part-time. It was a last-minute favor for a coworker, and Jason, dependable and kind, had agreed. Jason didn't drive. He usually got rides or walked. That day, he made a simple plan: meet his coworker at Benson High School, just 8 blocks from his home. It was a familiar path. He'd walked it many times before. It wasn't far, less than a 10-minute stroll, and it was the middle of the day. He left home around 11:15 a.m. His friend would be waiting. The plan was easy, but Jason never arrived, and no one ever saw him again. At first, his parents, Jim and Kelly Jolkowski, weren't too worried. Maybe he got delayed. Maybe plans changed. But when Fazoli's called saying he didn't show up for work, and his coworker said he never made it to the school, concern turned to fear. Jason was responsible. He wasn't the type to vanish. He had no reason to run. No history of mental health issues. No known enemies. He wasn't involved with drugs or alcohol. He had dreams, goals. He just finished his first year at Iowa Western Community College, studying broadcasting. His parents searched the streets, called friends, drove the neighborhood in circles. They called the police. But because Jason was 19, legally an adult, authorities didn't treat it as an emergency. No sign of a struggle, no evidence of a crime, just a missing person with no clues and no leads. But something wasn't right. Jason's family knew it, and as hours stretched into days, a terrifying question settled in. What could have happened during those 8 short blocks? This wasn't the wilderness. This wasn't the middle of the night. This was suburban Omaha in daylight. A shy, well-liked young man had simply disappeared. No scream, no camera footage, no body, nothing. The Jolkowskis were left to piece together what they could. But there wasn't much. His bank account was untouched. He never used his cell phone. No one claimed to have seen him on the street. It was as if Jason had walked out the front door and vanished into thin air. Could someone have taken him in that narrow window of time? Or did something darker happen along that quiet route to school? On the morning of June 13th, 2001, Jason Jolkowski was up early in his family's modest Omaha home. He lived with his parents and younger brother in the Benson area, a neighborhood with a small-town feel tucked into the city. Jason wasn't in any rush. The day's plan was straightforward, and he had time. Before leaving the house, Jason spent part of the morning helping his 9-year-old brother with some routine chores. According to his family, he was moving trash cans and assisting with small tasks around the yard. It was nothing unusual, just Jason being Jason. Quiet, dependable, and always willing to help, especially when it came to his little brother. Jason had been called into work on short notice. He was employed part-time at Fazoli's, a fast-casual Italian restaurant chain located on 108th and L Street. The job wasn't glamorous, but Jason was proud of it. It helped him earn some money while attending Iowa Western Community College, where he was studying broadcasting. Jason had a growing interest in radio and behind-the-scenes production work. He was shy in public, but his family said he came alive when working with sound equipment or helping others learn the ropes. That day, he agreed to cover a shift for a coworker. But because Jason didn't drive, he was working toward getting his license. He arranged for a ride. The plan was to meet his coworker at Benson High School, just a few blocks away from home. Jason had attended the high school and knew the area well. It was only about 8 blocks, a 10-minute walk, tops. Rather than asking the coworker to navigate directly to his house, he offered to meet them at the school. which had a parking lot and was easy to find. Jason reportedly received the call about work around 10:45 a.m. By 11:15 a.m., he was supposed to be at the high school for pickup. He left home shortly before that, no more than 10 or 15 minutes prior. He didn't take much with him. No wallet, no change of clothes, just a black wallet-style phone case and himself. He never made it. His coworker waited at the high school for a while but never saw Jason. After a while, they left, assuming maybe plans had changed or something came up. But Jason's parents were soon contacted by Fazoli's. Jason hadn't shown up. That wasn't like him at all. He was responsible, punctual, and always gave notice if he couldn't make it. That's when the concern turned to alarm. There were no known reasons for him to leave voluntarily. He had money in his bank account. He hadn't packed a bag. He had no history of mental illness or behavior that would suggest running away. And his relationship with his family was solid, especially with his younger brother who looked up to him. In fact, the memory of Jason helping with chores that morning would become a painful image his family would hold on to in the days, weeks, and years that followed. Jason's parents quickly called friends, relatives, and nearby businesses. Had anyone seen him walking? Did he get picked up by someone else? Did something happen between the house and the high school? But there were no answers. No one remembered seeing him on the sidewalk. No one recalled hearing a sound. In the middle of a bright, ordinary summer morning in Omaha, Jason simply disappeared. The mystery wasn't just the disappearance. It was the silence around it. The lack of evidence. No disturbance. No dropped belongings. No phone calls. Just a quiet boy who left to meet a friend and never made it. If Jason had left even 2 minutes later, or someone had looked out their window at just the right time, could this have all ended differently? What do you think happened to Jason between his front door and that school parking lot? Let us know in the comments. By all accounts, June 13th, 2001, was an unremarkable Wednesday in Omaha. Weather-wise, it was mild and clear. No rain, no strong winds, nothing that would have caused disruption or distracted neighbors going about their usual routines. Jason Jolkowski, 19, had spent the morning helping his younger brother with chores, then prepared for what should have been a short, uneventful walk to meet his coworker from Fazoli's. The plan was simple: meet at Benson High School, roughly 8 blocks away from Jason's home on 48th and Bedford Avenue. It wasn't a route he was unfamiliar with. He had attended the school and knew the sidewalks, backyards, and street corners as well as anyone. At around 10:45 a.m., a neighbor reportedly saw Jason outside near his home. This would be the last confirmed sighting of him. Jason wasn't dressed in anything that would have made him stand out. He wore a black Chicago Cubs t-shirt, black dress pants, and black sneakers. It was standard for his work attire. He had no backpack, no hat, no extra belongings. Just his cell phone, which was in a black leather wallet-style case. That phone would never be used again. Jason's coworker, who had agreed to give him a ride to work that day, arrived at the Benson High School parking lot shortly before 11:15 a.m. They waited, assuming Jason would walk up within minutes. But the minutes passed, then 10, then 20. There was no call, no sign of Jason, no explanation. Eventually, the coworker gave up waiting and drove off, unaware that they were likely the last person who expected to see Jason that day. Back at home, Jason's parents hadn't yet realized something was wrong. But soon after, Fazoli's called the house. Jason hadn't shown up for his shift. That's when the panic set in. Kelly and Jim Jolkowski immediately began retracing his steps. He hadn't made it to the school. He hadn't stopped by a friend's house. He hadn't called. They checked the route he would have taken, block by block. Every sidewalk, every alley, every front yard. Nothing. It was a quiet neighborhood in the middle of the day. There should have been someone, anyone, who saw something. But door-to-door checks revealed no witnesses. No one had seen Jason beyond the one neighbor who last glimpsed him shortly before 11 a.m. There were no sounds of distress, no unusual activity reported, just complete and total silence. The Jolkowskis called the Omaha Police Department, hoping for immediate help, but law enforcement did not initially treat Jason's case as high priority. At 19 years old, Jason was legally an adult. And since there was no evidence of foul play, police believed he may have left on his own. His parents strongly disagreed. Jason had no history of running away. He left behind his wallet and all of his belongings. His bank account remained untouched. He had plans that day. He was supposed to be at work. He had a close relationship with his family and no known issues that would suggest a reason to disappear. Despite the family's insistence, it took time for a full search to begin. And by then, those early critical hours, the golden window in missing persons cases, had passed. The 8 blocks between Jason's home and Benson High School became the focus of every theory, every search effort, and every sleepless night that followed. Somewhere during that walk, something had happened. But what? There were no surveillance cameras on the route, not in 2001. There was no Ring doorbell footage, no cell tower data readily available, and no GPS. It was a time before digital footprints could fill in the gaps. And Jason, quiet and routine, hadn't left one behind. Years later, that stretch of sidewalk still haunts his family. So many questions, so few answers, and one young man who never came home. What would you do if your loved one disappeared without a trace just a few blocks from home, and no one saw a thing? By early afternoon on June 13, 2001, concern inside the Jolkowski home had started to build. Jason, 19 years old, was typically dependable and punctual. He'd promised to meet a coworker at Benson High School around 11:15 a.m. so they could drive together to their shift at Fazoli's. But when that coworker called to say Jason hadn't shown up, a quiet unease settled in. Jim and Kelly Jolkowski weren't the type to jump to conclusions, but this didn't sit right. Jason wasn't forgetful. He didn't blow off plans. And he certainly wouldn't disappear without saying something. They began calling his friends, anyone who might have seen him or heard from him. Nothing. No one had seen Jason since he left the house that morning. The last confirmed sighting came from a neighbor who reported seeing him outside around 10:45 a.m., walking in the direction of Benson High School. That was it. His mother, Kelly, decided to retrace the route herself. It was a short walk, just 8 blocks from their house to the school parking lot. Jason would have likely taken Bedford Avenue, a quiet residential street. There were no signs of struggle, no dropped belongings, no indication that anything had happened at all. It was as if the sidewalk had simply swallowed him whole. As the afternoon wore on, the mood inside the Jolkowski home shifted. The initial confusion, the maybe he got delayed or maybe he changed plans, began to crumble. Jason didn't drive and he hadn't taken the family car. He wasn't the type to hitchhike. He didn't have a girlfriend, and his social circle was small and well known to his family. His wallet and ID were still at home. His bank account hadn't been touched. No one had heard from him. And his cell phone, a basic model tucked inside a black wallet-style case, remained silent. That's when the fear truly set in. By late afternoon, the Jolkowskis made the decision no parent ever wants to make. They called the police. Omaha Police responded to the call but did not immediately treat Jason's case as a high-priority disappearance. At 19, Jason was legally an adult. Without evidence of foul play or a known mental health issue, officers suggested he may have left voluntarily. Perhaps he needed space. Maybe he'd be back soon. But Kelly and Jim knew their son. He wasn't impulsive. He didn't have emotional outbursts or secret plans. Jason was steady, grounded. His dream was to work in broadcasting, to operate behind the scenes at a radio station, using his strong voice and technical mind to help others shine. He was just finishing his first year of community college. He had goals. He had a schedule. And he had never once just disappeared. Still, the initial law enforcement response remained cautious. Without physical evidence or witnesses, police had little to go on. No Amber Alert was issued. Jason was too old to qualify. Flyers weren't printed immediately. Media coverage didn't start for days. The family was on their own. So they began doing what they could. They walked the route again, knocked on doors, repeated the same story over and over. Have you seen our son? Do you remember seeing a young man in a black Cubs t-shirt walking this morning? Did your dog bark at anything unusual? Nothing. No one saw a thing. As the sun set over Omaha that Wednesday night, the Jolkowski family stayed up, hoping for a call, a knock at the door, anything. But the silence was deafening. Their son had vanished in daylight, in a neighborhood where people sat on porches, mowed lawns, and walked dogs, and nobody saw a thing. It would be the first of many sleepless nights, the beginning of a fight that would stretch into weeks, months, and years. A fight for answers, for awareness, and for Jason. Have you ever felt like someone wasn't taking your emergency seriously? What would you do if the people meant to help just waited? If you believe Jason's story deserves to be heard, please like this video, share this case with someone who cares, subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to hit the notification bell, because every share helps bring attention to the missing. The following day, June 14th, 2001, Omaha police began to treat Jason Jolkowski's disappearance with greater seriousness. While their initial response the day before had been subdued, citing Jason's status as a legal adult, the Jolkowski family's insistence, coupled with the complete lack of contact from Jason, began to shift the tone. There was no phone call, no note, no credit card or bank account activity. Jason's cell phone remained inactive. And just as disturbing, no one had reported seeing anything suspicious, not during or after the time Jason was last seen. For someone to vanish on foot in daylight in a residential neighborhood was alarming, and law enforcement could no longer ignore that. The police began a formal canvass of the area surrounding the Jolkowski home and the 8-block route to Benson High School. Officers knocked on doors, questioned neighbors, and attempted to trace Jason's steps using any available eyewitness accounts. But there was a problem. There were no eyewitness accounts. Aside from the neighbor who saw Jason outside his home around 10:45 a.m., no one else remembered seeing him that morning. There were no reports of screams, arguments, or unusual vehicles. Nothing that stood out. It was as if Jason had vanished between one step and the next. The route Jason would have taken, from 48th and Bedford Avenue to Benson High, was quiet, lined with single-family homes, trees, and sidewalks. There were no known hazards, no major traffic, and in 2001, it was not common for homes to have security cameras or surveillance systems. There were no video doorbells, no convenience stores or businesses with outdoor footage that caught him walking by. This lack of surveillance proved to be a major obstacle. Today, law enforcement might be able to pull ring footage, track cell tower pings, or review street camera data. But in 2001, those tools weren't available, at least not in Jason's neighborhood. So the search stayed physical. Officers walked the route multiple times. They checked wooded areas, alleys, and backyards. The school grounds at Benson High were inspected, but there was no sign Jason had ever made it there. The coworker who was supposed to pick him up confirmed again. They waited at the school parking lot around 11:15 a.m. Jason never showed. Police distributed Jason's photo and description to local news outlets. Flyers were printed and handed out. Community members began joining the effort. The Jolkowski family contacted organizations like the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Eventually, Jason's case was entered into national databases and missing person networks. But those first few days felt like chasing shadows. One of the most frustrating realities was the total absence of physical evidence. No dropped phone, no scuff marks on the sidewalk, no clothing, no signs of a struggle. There was nothing for police to follow, no starting point beyond his own front steps. The black Chicago Cubs t-shirt, the black dress pants, the black sneakers, the cell phone case, all missing, all unseen. As if Jason, 6 feet tall, nearly 165 pounds, had become invisible. Detectives also looked into possible voluntary disappearance. Had Jason wanted to leave? Had he met someone? Was there something troubling him? But every detail of his life pushed back against that theory. He was scheduled to work. He had just completed his first year of college. He was close to his family. His mom described him as non-confrontational, shy, and predictable. His life was normal, stable, and quiet, and now it was silent. As the official search ramped up, the Jolkowskis grew more desperate. They kept hoping for a clue, even a small one, that might explain what happened between 10:45 a.m. and 11:15 a.m. on that sunny June day. But nothing came. If someone can vanish without a trace in broad daylight, what else are we missing right in front of us? As the days after June 13, 2001 passed with no sign of Jason Jolkowski, the silence surrounding his disappearance became unbearable. His parents, Jim and Kelly, had exhausted the basics. Phone calls, retracing his path, knocking on doors, talking to friends. Omaha police had canvassed the neighborhood, checked alleys, combed through the area between Jason's home on 48th Street and Benson High School. But nothing turned up. Not a single clue. And so the questions began. The first theory, and perhaps the most painful for any parent, was that Jason might have run away. Law enforcement initially leaned toward this idea. He was 19, legally an adult. There were no signs of foul play. Maybe he chose to leave. But for Jim and Kelly, that made no sense. Jason had just finished his freshman year at Iowa Western Community College, where he was studying broadcasting. He had a steady part-time job at Fazoli's. He didn't have a history of depression, mental illness, or impulsive behavior. He wasn't fighting with his family. He wasn't isolated. His younger brother adored him. He'd agreed to work a shift that day, and Jason wasn't the kind of person to make a commitment and not follow through. He had made plans to meet his coworker at Benson High School, a location he chose because it was easy to find and familiar. He was helping his little brother with chores earlier that morning. His wallet and ID were left behind at home. His bank account remained untouched. There was nothing in his behavior that suggested he was planning to leave, and no indication that he had any reason to. If he had run away, why leave in the middle of the day with no personal belongings? Why not take money or pack a bag? Why leave without telling a single person, especially his close-knit family? The Jolkowskis firmly rejected the idea that Jason left voluntarily. And over time, law enforcement came to agree. There was simply no evidence, digital or otherwise, to support that theory. That left a far darker possibility. Abduction. If Jason had been taken, how could it have happened so quickly, and in such a visible area? The street between his home and Benson High School is lined with homes, driveways, and yards. It's not isolated. It's not wooded. It's not abandoned. It was also the middle of the day, sometime between 10:45 and 11:15 a.m. That's when traffic picks up. People are heading to lunch. Neighbors are mowing lawns. Kids are on summer break. Someone should have seen something, but no one did. There was no scream reported. No suspicious vehicle was seen speeding away. No items were found, no dropped phone, no ripped clothing, no sign of a struggle. Jason's walk was so short that if someone had targeted him, they would have had only minutes to act, and do so completely unnoticed. That mystery has led some to wonder, was this a random crime of opportunity? Could someone have lured Jason into a car under false pretenses? He was trusting, quiet, and always trying to be helpful. Could someone have pretended to need assistance, or acted like they were there to pick him up? It's possible. But again, no witnesses came forward to say they saw any vehicle stopped along the route. Another theory was that Jason may have experienced some sort of medical event, a seizure, an accident, or confusion that led him off course. But once again, no evidence supported this. There was no body found, no footprints leading into secluded areas, no medical history that would suggest seizures or blackout episodes. Jason had been healthy, focused, and mentally clear the morning he disappeared. Eventually, the lack of answers forced the conversation toward the unnerving. Could Jason have been taken by someone who knew how to remain invisible? Could he have been abducted by someone experienced? Someone who knew how to act fast, with no trace? The Jolkowskis couldn't answer that question. Neither could the police. Over the years, psychics, tipsters, and amateur investigators have sent in hundreds of suggestions. Most unverified, many far-fetched, and none that led to Jason. In the absence of evidence, one question echoed louder than all the rest. How does someone vanish in a quiet Omaha neighborhood, in broad daylight, without a single person seeing a thing? What do you think is the most likely explanation for Jason's disappearance? And why has not even one piece of evidence ever been found? To understand why Jason Jolkowski's disappearance remains so haunting, you have to understand the kind of person he was. His story isn't just about the terrifying silence that followed him vanishing into thin air. It's about who he was before that morning, and why no one who knew him could believe he would ever walk away without a word. Jason Anthony Jolkowski was born on June 24, 1981. He was just shy of his 20th birthday when he disappeared. He lived with his parents, Jim and Kelly Jolkowski, and his younger brother in a modest home in Omaha, Nebraska. Their household was stable, loving, and close-knit. Jason wasn't just a good son. He was the kind of person everyone describes with words like reliable, gentle, and thoughtful. By all accounts, Jason was quiet and introverted, but kind-hearted. He was the kind of teenager who never gave his parents trouble. He didn't drink, he didn't party, and he wasn't known to stay out late or hang around dangerous crowds. He kept a small circle of close friends and was deeply attached to his family, especially his little brother, who was just 9 years old at the time Jason disappeared. On the morning of June 13, 2001, Jason helped his younger brother bring trash cans back to the side of the house before getting ready for work. It was a small gesture, but perfectly in line with his everyday behavior: helpful, respectful, and present. This wasn't someone who was withdrawing from his home life or distancing himself from the people who loved him. He was showing up in the ways that mattered most. Jason had just completed his first year at Iowa Western Community College, where he studied broadcasting. His passion was radio, not being on the mic, but working behind the scenes. He was especially interested in producing and operating audio equipment. He had even volunteered at his former high school to help teachers with setting up sound systems. His dream was to work at a local radio station someday, contributing quietly but meaningfully. He was also holding down a part-time job at Fazoli's, a fast-casual Italian restaurant chain. It wasn't glamorous work, but Jason took it seriously. He showed up, he followed rules, he didn't cut corners, and he cared about doing his part. That's what made June 13th so confusing. He had agreed to cover a coworker's shift that day. It was completely in his character to say yes to help someone out. And yet, he never arrived. He also wasn't spontaneous. Jason didn't make snap decisions. His parents described him as the kind of person who always let them know where he was going. He didn't keep secrets, and he wasn't prone to reckless behavior. He had no known mental health conditions, no history of running away, and no previous disappearances or risky episodes. He wasn't impulsive. If anything, he was predictable in a comforting, trustworthy way. According to his family, Jason had no romantic relationships at the time of his disappearance. He didn't show signs of stress, isolation, or instability. He wasn't caught up in any conflicts. His school life was steady. His home life was loving. And his plans for the future were simple and grounded. He didn't drive yet. He was working toward getting his license, but he got around by walking or getting rides from friends and coworkers. That's why it wasn't unusual for him to plan a meetup at Benson High School with his coworker that day. He wasn't trying to make a big deal out of anything. He was just taking the same route he always did, trying to make it easier for the person picking him up. But he never made it to the school. The theory that Jason ran away never made sense to those who knew him. He left behind everything: his wallet, his ID, his clothing, his routines, all untouched. There were no warning signs, no secrets revealed, no after-the-fact messages, no hints dropped in the weeks leading up to June 13th. Everything about Jason's life pointed to someone who was grounded, responsible, and engaged with the world around him. His mother, Kelly, would later say in multiple interviews that Jason was the kind of son every parent hopes for. He didn't complain, didn't argue, and didn't create chaos. He was dependable almost to a fault. For someone like Jason to disappear so completely, without reason or trace, was more than just alarming. It was unthinkable. And yet, that's exactly what happened. Today, when people revisit Jason's case, they often focus on the timeline, the route, the lack of evidence. But it's just as important to remember who he was. He wasn't a troubled teen. He wasn't careless or distant. He was a kind, intelligent, responsible young man with a clear sense of direction in life. If a person like Jason, grounded, loved, and going nowhere, can disappear without a trace, what does that say about how vulnerable we all really are? It was a walk Jason Jolkowski had made before, roughly 8 blocks from his house near 48th and Bedford Avenue to the parking lot of Benson High School in Omaha, Nebraska. A straight shot. A calm, residential neighborhood. No intersections that would have taken more than a moment to cross. Sidewalks lined with trees and houses. It was a route that should have taken no more than 10 minutes. Jason left home around 10:45 a.m. on Wednesday, June 13, 2001. He was dressed in his work uniform. A black Chicago Cubs t-shirt, black dress pants, and black sneakers. He carried his cell phone in a black wallet-style case, a basic device by modern standards. It was one of the only items he brought with him. He didn't have his wallet or any other belongings. He wasn't expecting to be gone long. His destination was Benson High School, located near North 52nd Street. His plan was to meet a coworker there for a ride to work at Fazoli's on 108th and L Street. The plan wasn't unusual. Jason didn't drive and often walked or arranged rides. He had chosen the school as the meeting point because it was a landmark the coworker could easily find. A common-sense decision meant to make things easier. The route he likely took has since become a focal point in the case. From the Jolkowski home, Jason would have walked west on Bedford Avenue. The most direct path to the school's parking lot would have involved taking a few slight turns, but nothing complicated or risky. Most of the streets are lined with homes. It's a quiet area with very little commercial development. There are no gas stations or public businesses directly on that path. In 2001, there were also no surveillance cameras on nearby buildings or poles, and very few homes had personal security systems or video monitoring. That short walk, a route Jason knew well, is now the stretch of street that has haunted investigators and his family for more than 2 decades. According to verified reports, a neighbor saw Jason around 10:45 a.m., just outside his house. That is the last confirmed sighting of him. His coworker arrived at the Benson High School parking lot at 11:15 a.m., waited, and eventually left when Jason didn't show up. That gives a window of about 30 minutes in which Jason vanished, somewhere along an 8-block stretch in broad daylight. Police and family canvassed that route extensively in the days and weeks that followed. Officers knocked on doors, asked neighbors, and revisited homes to see if anyone had noticed a vehicle, heard a sound, or seen something unusual. But no one had. There were no witnesses, no dropped items, no tire marks, no suspicious vehicles reported, no noise complaints, no trace, and just as significantly, no video evidence. In 2001, the world was not yet saturated with surveillance. There were no Ring doorbells or motion-activated cameras mounted on every home. No smartphones to capture a random moment from across the street. Most homes on Jason's route didn't even have basic security systems. That gap in technology became one of the most frustrating elements in the investigation. Today, with widespread surveillance and mobile tracking, the chances of someone vanishing in such a short span would be dramatically lower. But in Jason's case, there was nothing to pull from, no digital trail, no security footage, and no traffic camera to capture even a shadow in the distance. The lack of visual evidence made it nearly impossible for police to determine whether Jason made it partway, halfway, or even all the way to the school. His phone was never used again. His bank account remained untouched. There was no indication of movement beyond the initial sighting by the neighbor. This stretch of street, so familiar, so ordinary, became a black hole in time. To this day, no physical evidence has ever been recovered from that walk. Jason didn't leave a clue behind. No one saw anything that could help investigators retrace his steps. His family still refers to it as the walk that swallowed him. The silence of that street is what transformed Jason's case from a missing persons report into a cold case. And that silence, deafening in its emptiness, has made it one of the most baffling unsolved disappearances in Nebraska's history. What would you do if someone you loved vanished within blocks of your home, and no one heard a sound, saw a thing, or captured a frame? If you believe stories like Jason's deserve answers, please like this video, share this case with someone who cares. Subscribe to our channel, and every share keeps the search alive. And don't forget to tap the notification bell, so you never miss the next. In the days following Jason Jolkowski's disappearance, His family found themselves caught in an agonizing blur of fear, confusion, and waiting. With each hour that passed, the silence surrounding his case became louder. He hadn't contacted anyone. He hadn't accessed his bank account. His phone was silent. There were no signs, no clues, no movement. Still, they refused to stay still. Within 24 hours of reporting Jason missing, Jim and Kelly Jolkowski began posting flyers around the neighborhood. They printed his senior yearbook photo, Jason's full face framed by short, dark hair and a shy, quiet smile. At the time of his disappearance, Jason was 6 feet tall and weighed about 165 pounds. He had a fair complexion and wore glasses. His clothing on June 13th had been confirmed: a black Chicago Cubs t-shirt, black dress pants, and black sneakers. He was carrying only his cell phone in a black wallet-style case. The first flyers went up near their home, along the streets Jason likely would have walked, and at Benson High School, the site where he was supposed to meet his coworker. From there, the outreach quickly spread across Omaha. Word of Jason's case began appearing in local news reports. Television stations in Nebraska aired short stories about the missing college student who had vanished in the middle of the day. Local newspapers picked up the story, often emphasizing how baffling it was that there were no witnesses. His parents gave early interviews, describing Jason's behavior that morning, his personality, and why the idea of him running away simply didn't add up. Kelly Jolkowski's voice became one of steady resolve. In every interview, she repeated the same clear message. Jason was not the kind of person who would disappear on his own. He was close with his family, had no problems at home, and had been making plans for his future. He had a job. He had a dream. He was loved. Despite their emotional exhaustion, the Jolkowskis worked tirelessly to keep Jason's face in the public eye. They coordinated with Omaha Police to distribute flyers statewide. They connected with non-profit organizations focused on missing persons, including the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, NCMEC. Even though Jason was technically no longer a minor, while the NCMEC primarily focuses on children under 18, they still included Jason in their outreach due to the unusual nature of his case. Eventually, Jason's case drew attention beyond Nebraska. Kelly and Jim began doing interviews with national media, including networks like CNN and Fox News, hoping someone somewhere might recognize their son or remember seeing something that hadn't seemed important at the time. They also reached out to radio programs, missing persons podcasts, and national bulletin networks. But with each interview came a growing frustration. There was still no evidence, no surveillance footage, no personal belongings found. No indication that Jason had made it even halfway to his destination. Despite the flyers, the TV reports, the newspaper coverage, and even digital postings on early internet message boards and forums, there were no verified sightings of Jason anywhere. The community stepped up in support. Volunteers helped distribute flyers across neighboring towns. Some even joined search efforts, walking the route from Jason's home to Benson High School, hoping to notice something that might have been overlooked. But every effort ended the same way, with no leads. Police continued to treat the case as active, but without anything to work with, progress stalled. The media attention, while helpful in raising awareness, didn't bring the answers the family so desperately needed. As the weeks turned into months, Jason's name began appearing on national missing persons lists, and his photo was circulated through federal databases like NAMUS and the FBI's missing persons site. Yet still, no one came forward. In interviews, Kelly Jolkowski often expressed frustration, not at the public, but at the situation itself. "It's like he vanished into thin air," she told one reporter. "Somebody has to know something." Her words became a rallying cry not just for her family, but for others dealing with similar cases, people whose loved ones were missing without a trace, without answers, and too often, without action. As national attention began to wane, the Jolkowskis refused to let Jason's name disappear from public consciousness. They built a website. They established contact with national organizations. They began planning awareness efforts that would eventually grow far beyond Jason's case alone. But in the summer of 2001, the spotlight was still small. The local stories came and went. The flyers faded in the sun. And the family, surrounded by coverage but starved for answers, was left clinging to hope. Why do some cases receive immediate, widespread attention while others fade, even when the circumstances are just as alarming? What do you think helps keep a case alive in the public eye? When a child goes missing, there is no manual for how to cope with the silence. No guidebook for how to keep going when there's no crime scene, no suspect, and no clue what happened. For Jim and Kelly Jolkowski, the days after June 13, 2001, blurred together. But the emotional weight was sharp, piercing, and unrelenting. Jason, their oldest son, had simply walked out of the house and vanished. No trace, no explanation, and no one saw a thing. For Kelly, the grief was immediate, but it wasn't the kind of grief that comes with closure. It was grief tangled with confusion, anger, and helplessness. Jason wasn't a runaway. He wasn't troubled. He had done everything right. And yet, he was gone. In the earliest interviews, Kelly Jolkowski's voice was clear and composed. But beneath that strength was a mother slowly being crushed by the unknown. She told reporters, "You have to go on, but you're stuck in time." She explained that each day felt like walking through wet cement. There was no new information, no confirmed sightings, and every night ended the same way it began, without Jason. The Jolkowskis never stopped searching. Every phone ring brought a spike of hope. Every lead, even those that turned out to be hoaxes or mistaken identity, was followed just in case. But each one collapsed under scrutiny. There was no progress, just pain. Kelly took the lead in managing the outreach, the media, and the awareness campaigns. She spent countless hours speaking with investigators, writing press releases, emailing national organizations, and posting Jason's story wherever she could online. She became the family's spokesperson, not because she wanted to, but because she had to. Over time, the emotional toll became more visible. In interviews given in the months and years following Jason's disappearance, Kelly described how even simple tasks, like walking past his bedroom, became emotionally devastating. The house was still full of Jason's presence. His clothes, his school books, his photos. But he wasn't there. She once said it was like living in a house full of ghosts, except the one they were mourning wasn't confirmed dead. Every missing persons case is painful, but Jason stood out for the complete lack of anything to hold on to. No signs of foul play, no calls, no note, no clues. The unanswered questions left Kelly feeling trapped, grieving a loss she couldn't define. Jim Jolkowski, Jason's father, was also deeply affected. But where Kelly channeled her pain into action, Jim carried it more quietly. In interviews, he often deferred to Kelly, supporting her efforts while managing the internal heartbreak of watching his family suffer, especially his wife and their younger son, who looked up to Jason. The disappearance didn't just affect the parents. It left Jason's younger brother confused and frightened. One morning, his big brother helped him take out the trash. That afternoon, he was gone. How do you explain that to a child? In a public statement, Kelly once described the emotional state of their family as being stuck between hope and despair. There were days when she believed Jason might come walking through the door. Other days, she feared the worst, that someone had taken him, that he had been harmed, and that they would never know what truly happened. Over time, the pain evolved. The early adrenaline, the urgency, the public pleas, the news coverage eventually faded. But the grief remained. It became chronic, lingering just beneath the surface, ready to surface at a moment's notice. Holidays were harder. Jason's birthday, June 24th, became a painful marker of another year without answers. Kelly has often spoken about the emotional isolation that comes with a long-term missing persons case. Friends and neighbors initially rallied around the family, but as time passed and no new information surfaced, people moved on. The Jolkowskis were left behind, still searching, still hoping, still aching. In her own words, Kelly once said, "We don't get to grieve. We don't get to move forward. We're stuck. And all we want is to know what happened." That desire for truth, not just for their own peace, but to honor the son they raised, became the foundation for what would later become a national advocacy effort. But in 2001, 2002, and into the early 2000s, they were just a family in limbo. suspended in a place between hope and heartbreak, waiting for a call that never came. If you were in Kelly's shoes, holding on for years with no closure, what would keep you going? For Jim and Kelly Jolkowski, life after June 13, 2001, became a painful loop, a cycle of waiting, hoping, and wondering. But in that limbo, they made a choice few could imagine. Instead of retreating into their grief, they turned their tragedy into something bigger. They built a movement. In 2003, just 2 years after Jason's disappearance, Kelly founded Project Jason, a non-profit organization created to help families of missing persons navigate the overwhelming emotional and legal landscape that follows when someone vanishes. What started as a desperate attempt to give Jason's disappearance purpose quickly evolved into one of the first digital-first advocacy platforms for the missing in the United States. The idea behind Project Jason was simple. No family should go through what the Jolkowskis went through, alone, confused, and unheard. Kelly Jolkowski used her own experience as the foundation for the organization's goals. She had felt the frustration of being dismissed early on by law enforcement. She knew what it meant to live in uncertainty, and she understood the emotional toll of searching for someone you love when no clues exist. So she got to work. Project Jason's mission was clear: to assist families of the missing through support, awareness, resources, and education. One of the nonprofit's first major actions was creating a comprehensive online platform that listed missing persons, including long-term cases like Jason's. The site offered printable flyers, contact information for law enforcement, and guidance on what steps to take in the first critical hours after a disappearance. A guide that Kelly had wished existed when Jason vanished. In a time before social media was mainstream, Project Jason became one of the earliest organizations to use the internet as a strategic tool for missing persons awareness. Families from across the country reached out. Some had new cases. Others were still waiting for answers years or even decades later. The organization began to serve as a central hub, a digital meeting place where families could find not only resources but also each other. But Project Jason didn't stop at raising awareness. The nonprofit also launched several original programs, including Adopt a Missing Person program encouraging individuals, businesses, and groups to adopt a missing person by distributing flyers, sharing stories, and raising visibility in local communities. 18 Will Angels, a unique program that worked with the trucking industry to spread missing persons posters across the country using long-haul drivers. Posters were placed in truck stops, rest areas, and delivered coast to coast, bringing awareness to places where missing individuals might be seen or remembered. The Voices for the Missing blog, a platform where Kelly and other contributors wrote about the realities of living with ambiguous loss, the challenges of cold cases, and the tireless efforts of families to keep their loved ones' names alive. By 2005, Project Jason had been featured in national media and was collaborating with other high-profile organizations like the National Center for Missing Adults and Team Hope, a division of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, NCMEC. The organization helped influence public policy as well, including supporting legislation to improve how missing persons cases were handled at the state and national levels. In 2010, Project Jason played a role in the passage of the Suzanne's Law expansion efforts, named for Suzanne Lyle, another long-term missing person. The law increased federal support for investigations involving missing young adults between the ages of 18 and 21, a category Jason had fallen into when he vanished at age 19. Despite limited staff and resources, the organization kept growing. Families across the country expressed gratitude for the emotional support and practical help they received through Project Jason. Whether it was assistance drafting press releases, help navigating law enforcement relationships, or simply having someone to talk to who truly understood. For Kelly, the work was always personal. Jason remained at the heart of everything she did. She once said in an interview, "We can't give up on Jason and we can't give up on the others. Every missing person matters. Every family matters." In 2008, Kelly was recognized with the Volunteer for Victims Award from the U.S. Department of Justice's Office for Victims of Crime, a national acknowledgement of her tireless dedication to families in crisis. Though Project Jason remained a grassroots effort, its influence spread widely through media appearances, national conferences, and partnerships with advocacy groups. And more than just policy or poster distribution, Project Jason gave families something most of them had lost: a voice. Even as the years passed and Jason's case remained unsolved, the Jolkowskis never stopped fighting, not just for their son, but for all the sons, daughters, sisters, and brothers who went missing without explanation. Project Jason became a legacy born from loss, a bridge between silence and action. If you had the chance to turn your deepest pain into purpose, would you? Or would the weight of grief be too much to carry? In the months and years after Jason Jolkowski vanished on June 13, 2001, his family faced the unbearable weight of not knowing. No answers, no closure, and no path forward. But out of that silence came purpose. Jason's mother, Kelly Jolkowski, turned her personal tragedy into a nationwide mission for change. And in doing so, she helped create what would become one of Nebraska's most important pieces of legislation in missing persons advocacy: Jason's Law. The early days of Jason's disappearance exposed critical gaps in the way missing persons cases, especially those involving adults, were handled. When Jason, a 19-year-old, failed to arrive at Benson High School that morning to meet a coworker, his family immediately knew something was wrong. But when they called law enforcement, the response was slower than they expected. Police initially viewed Jason's disappearance as non-urgent. He was legally an adult. There was no sign of foul play. There were no immediate signs to indicate a crime. That delay proved devastating. Jason's family soon realized that not all missing persons were treated equally. Minors, particularly children under the age of 18, had broader protections. But young adults ages 18 and up existed in a gray area. In many jurisdictions, including Nebraska at the time, adults were considered legally free to disappear unless there was explicit evidence of danger or criminal activity. The Jolkowskis believed this gap needed to be closed. Kelly began lobbying local and state officials, sharing not only Jason's story but the stories of other families who found themselves paralyzed by inaction after their loved ones went missing. She partnered with law enforcement, victim advocates, and fellow families to draft a bill that would create standardized procedures for handling missing persons cases in Nebraska, regardless of the individual's age. The result was Jason's Law, signed into law by Nebraska Governor Dave Heineman in 2005, 4 years after Jason's disappearance. The law established several critical reforms. Mandatory law enforcement protocols. Jason's Law requires all law enforcement agencies in Nebraska to follow a standardized set of procedures when responding to a report of a missing person. This includes immediate entry of the person into the National Crime Information Center, NCIC, database, regardless of age or circumstance, and without any arbitrary waiting period. Number 24-hour delay requirement. Before Jason's Law, many departments operated under the unofficial belief that adults must be missing for 24 to 48 hours before action was necessary. Jason's Law eliminated that barrier. Now, reports of missing persons, even adults, must be acted on promptly and taken seriously from the start. Family notification rights. The law improved transparency between law enforcement and the families of missing persons, ensuring that parents, guardians, or spouses are kept informed during the early phases of the investigation. Training and awareness. Jason's Law pushed for more education and training within law enforcement agencies on best practices for missing persons investigations, especially cases that lack immediate signs of foul play. The passing of Jason's Law marked a turning point in Nebraska, but its influence reached beyond state borders. Jason's Law became a model for reform in other states looking to improve their own handling of adult missing persons cases. Advocates in other jurisdictions used the law as a reference in testimony before their legislatures, pointing to the practical, nonpartisan improvements it introduced. It highlighted a common-sense truth: age alone should not determine the urgency of a case. The law also drew the attention of federal-level advocacy groups, including the National Center for Missing Adults and the Office for Victims of Crime. Kelly Jolkowski was invited to speak at national conferences, where she shared Jason's story and explained how one family's persistence had led to meaningful change. In 2006, the case of Brian Schaefer, a 27-year-old medical student who vanished in Ohio under similarly mysterious circumstances, reignited the national conversation around adult disappearances. Jason's law was cited in media reports and legal discussions as a standard worth adopting in other states. And though the law could not bring Jason home, its existence became part of his legacy, one that extended far beyond Omaha. To this day, Jason's law continues to serve as a reminder that real change can come from unimaginable pain. Thanks to Kelly and Jim Jolkowski's tireless advocacy, families across Nebraska and beyond now have stronger protections, faster action, and clearer procedures when their loved ones go missing. What laws exist in your state to protect missing adults? And if you could change just one thing in how these cases are handled, what would it be? If stories like Jason's matter to you, please like this video, share this case with someone who cares. Subscribe to our channel, and your support keeps these cases from fading into silence. Don't forget to click the notification bell. Every share helps bring attention to the missing. Network connection lost. Tempting to reconnect. In the years after Jason Jolkowski disappeared on June 13, 2001, his family clung to hope, not blind optimism, but the kind of hope born from quiet desperation. They believed someone knew something, that maybe one tip, one phone call, or one sighting could change everything. But in the world of long-term missing persons cases, hope can become a double-edged sword. For every promising lead, there's a dead end. And worse, for every sincere tip, there are hoaxes and scams. Jason's family would come to know all of them. From the earliest days of Jason's disappearance, the Omaha Police Department kept the case open and active. Jason's information was entered into national databases, including the FBI's NCIC, National Crime Information Center, and later NAMUS, National Missing and Unidentified Person System. His flyers circulated nationwide thanks to efforts by Project Jason, and the Jolkowskis spoke openly with media in the hopes that someone, somewhere, might recognize his face. As a result, dozens of tips and alleged sightings came in over the years. Some were well-meaning. People believed they'd seen someone resembling Jason at gas stations, bus terminals, or even walking down the street in another state. These sightings were taken seriously. Law enforcement followed up when possible. Investigators cross-checked timelines, locations, and known movements. But none of them led to Jason. In a 2005 interview, Kelly Jolkowski said, "Every time the phone rings, your heart skips. You wonder, is this it? Will this be the one?" But more often than not, it wasn't. Sometimes the calls were vague. "I think I saw someone who looked like your son." Other times, they were more specific, but still turned out to be mistaken identity. One reported sighting in Colorado prompted brief investigation, as did another in Florida. But each one collapsed under scrutiny. There was no confirmation, no physical evidence, no link to Jason. And then came the darker side. Over the years, the Jolkowskis received cruel prank calls and emails from individuals pretending to be Jason or claiming to know what happened to him. Some sent anonymous messages stating they had information, only to go silent or admit it was a hoax. Others made outrageous claims, sometimes demanding money in exchange for fake details. One of the most emotionally painful incidents occurred when someone sent the Jolkowskis an email claiming to be Jason himself. The message was carefully written, using personal details that could be found online, just enough to seem convincing. For a moment, it stirred real hope. But police quickly determined it was a hoax. The person had no connection to Jason, and the message was traced back to someone with a history of targeting families of the missing. These kinds of scams are, unfortunately, not uncommon in high-profile disappearance cases. Families are vulnerable. They want answers. And some individuals, out of malice, mental instability, or a desire for attention, exploit that pain. Kelly spoke publicly about how devastating each false lead could be. "You get this spark of hope," she said. "You let yourself feel it, just a little, and then it crashes. And that crash hurts more every time." Despite the emotional toll, the Jolkowskis continued to follow up on every tip. They worked closely with the Omaha Police Department and vetted what they could through Project Jason's resources and law enforcement partners. When the case was covered on programs like America's Most Wanted, it prompted another wave of attention and another flood of messages. Once again, leads came in. Once again, none of them brought Jason home. By the mid-2000s, the family began cataloging every sighting, tip, or message. It became part of their process, a way to manage expectations and stay organized. But it never got easier. The emotional whiplash of hope rising and crashing, again and again, began to wear on them. Even legitimate tips often ended in heartbreak. A body found in another state. A John Doe who matched Jason's height and weight. An unidentified man pulled from a river with dark hair and no ID. Each time, the Jolkowskis braced themselves for the worst, or maybe the relief of finally knowing. But each time, it wasn't Jason. To this day, none of the tips received have led to a confirmed sighting, discovery, or resolution. His phone was never recovered. His bank account remains untouched. And no evidence has emerged that explains where Jason went after he stepped out of his house that morning in Omaha. Yet the family has never stopped listening. They've never stopped checking. Because in cases like Jason's, one real call, one truthful voice, could still break through the noise. If you were faced with years of fake leads, hoaxes, and disappointment, would you keep answering the phone? Or would the silence become easier to bear than the hope? As of 2025, it has been 24 years since Jason Jolkowski vanished without a trace from a quiet Omaha neighborhood on the morning of June 13, 2001. Despite years of flyers, national coverage, tips, legislative changes, and one of Nebraska's most recognized missing persons advocacy movements, Jason's case remains open, unsolved, and unresolved. No suspects have ever been named. No arrests have ever been made. No confirmed sightings have ever surfaced. And no physical evidence has ever been recovered. From the very beginning, the investigation into Jason's disappearance has been shaped by its most devastating characteristic: the total absence of clues. Jason was last seen at approximately 10:45 a.m., leaving his family's home near 48th and Bedford Avenue. He was on his way to Benson High School, just 8 blocks away, to meet a coworker for a ride to work at Fazoli's. He never arrived. His coworker waited until 11:15 a.m. and then left, assuming Jason had changed plans. He hadn't. He was gone. According to Omaha Police Department statements over the years, Jason's disappearance remains an active missing person case. He is still listed in federal and state databases, including the National Crime Information Center, NCIC, and NAMUS, National Missing and Unidentified Person System. His case is occasionally reviewed by detectives, but no new leads have led to breakthroughs. In interviews with the Omaha Police Department and the Jolkowski family over the past 2 decades, officials have repeatedly confirmed that Jason's case has never been closed and is not considered cold in the sense of abandonment. However, there has been little new movement. The original investigators are no longer assigned to the case, but the department has maintained contact with the family and confirmed that any viable lead will be investigated. Law enforcement has acknowledged that the lack of any evidence has made the investigation extremely difficult. There was no sign of a struggle. No personal belongings found along his route. No indication that Jason ever reached the high school. There are no known enemies. No warning signs. No clear motive. It remains, in the words of one former detective interviewed in local press, a case that defies explanation. Over the years, police have publicly stated that foul play is strongly suspected, but without evidence, they cannot move forward with criminal charges or identify a suspect. The absence of voluntary departure indicators, such as financial activity, phone usage, travel documents, or a change in behavior, supports the theory that Jason did not leave by choice. In 2021, Omaha World Herald and other Nebraska news outlets marked the 20th anniversary of Jason's disappearance with renewed coverage. Interviews with Kelly Jolkowski, Jason's mother and founder of Project Jason, emphasized the family's enduring pain and their ongoing push to keep Jason's story alive. Kelly reiterated that she does not believe Jason would ever have run away and that something happened to him during that walk. During that same year, Omaha police spokespersons confirmed that the department still maintains Jason's case file, and that although leads have become rare, they are reviewed when received. Law enforcement continues to treat the case as an unsolved criminal investigation with possible foul play, but no suspect or person of interest has ever been made public. In 2023, Jason's name was again included on missing persons lists shared by NAMAS, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, for awareness purposes, despite Jason being over 18, and Project Jason. His missing person profile remains active on multiple advocacy platforms. His photograph, now digitally age-progressed by forensic artists, is regularly shared online in hopes of jogged memories or updated leads. The age progression images show Jason as he might appear in his 40s. As of 2025, Jason would be 43 years old. To this day, no forensic evidence has been identified, no DNA, no items recovered, and no digital trail from Jason's phone. His bank account remains untouched since the day he disappeared. As for the Jolkowski family, their mission continues. Project Jason has remained active for over 2 decades, and Kelly has received numerous recognitions for her advocacy work. She continues to speak at conferences and forums about the gaps in missing persons policy, particularly for young adults. Despite years of public awareness campaigns, social media outreach, and partnerships with national organizations, Jason's disappearance remains one of Nebraska's most baffling unsolved missing persons cases. The sidewalk Jason walked on still exists. The route remains unchanged. But the question that's haunted his family and law enforcement still lingers. How does a young man vanish in the span of 8 blocks, in daylight, without leaving behind a single clue? What do you think happened to Jason Jolkowski? And after 24 years of silence, is there still hope someone knows the truth? In the years since Jason Jolkowski vanished on June 13, 2001, one voice has never wavered, the voice of his mother, Kelly Jolkowski. From the moment she realized her son was missing, Kelly stepped into a role she never asked for. Advocate, spokesperson, and public face of a fight that no parent ever wants to wage. At first, she did what any mother would do. Printed flyers, gave interviews, walked the route Jason was supposed to take. But when days turned to weeks and weeks into months, and still there were no answers, Kelly made a decision that would define the rest of her life. She refused to let Jason's story fade into the background. She would speak, not only for her son, but for every family still searching for someone they love. Kelly founded Project Jason in 2003, a nonprofit organization dedicated to assisting families of the missing. But long before that name became nationally recognized, Kelly was already writing, emailing, calling, and sharing Jason's story with anyone who would listen. In interview after interview, on local and national platforms, she described Jason: quiet, responsible, gentle. She emphasized that he had no reason to run away, that he was dependable, not reckless, that he helped his younger brother with chores the very morning he vanished. He didn't leave, she once told a reporter. Something happened to him. That belief, spoken again and again with clarity and strength, became the anchor of her public message. Over the years, Kelly has written numerous open letters, many of them published on the Project Jason website and advocacy platforms. These letters weren't just about Jason, they were about the agony of not knowing. She described the pain of waiting by the phone, of setting another place at the table for holidays that never got used, of walking past his bedroom door every day for years. One line from her writings stands out: when your child is missing, the world moves forward, but you don't. Kelly never allowed herself to be silent. She spoke at law enforcement conferences, legislative hearings, and missing persons awareness events, urging for reform in how missing adult cases were treated. She helped push for the passage of Jason's Law in 2005, which changed how Nebraska law enforcement responds to missing persons, eliminating delays and requiring immediate action, regardless of age. She also became a mentor to other families. Through Project Jason's email programs, support forums, and outreach campaigns, Kelly offered emotional support, guidance, and hard-earned wisdom. She walked families through the process of making flyers, contacting media, and advocating for their missing loved ones. She offered comfort to those who felt forgotten, because she understood that feeling better than anyone. In media appearances, she always returned to the same message: Jason deserves to be found. Even as the years passed and tips dried up, she remained hopeful. Not blindly, but determinedly. She called it living in the maybe. the place between denial and acceptance, between grief and hope. Kelly has often described the emotional tightrope of missing persons advocacy. On one hand, you fight for visibility, reform, and justice. On the other, you battle private heartbreak that never truly fades. She once said, "People say we're strong, but we don't feel strong. We do this because we have no choice." What she wants people to remember most is not just Jason's disappearance, but Jason himself. He was a quiet young man with dreams of working in radio. A son who helped with chores, studied broadcasting, worked part-time at Fazoli's, and had a gentle presence that brought calm to every room. He wasn't a headline or a statistic. He was a person, and he is still missing. As of 2025, Kelly continues to speak at events, update the Project Jason platform, and advocate for the missing. Though the pain never leaves, her voice has helped shape national conversations about how missing adult cases are handled, and why they deserve the same urgency as those involving children. When asked once what she would say to Jason if he could hear her, Kelly replied simply, "We love you, we miss you, and we'll never stop looking." If someone you loved vanished, and the world moved on, would you keep telling their story, even if no one listened at first? It was supposed to be a short walk, 8 blocks, from 48th and Bedford Avenue to Benson High School. A walk Jason Jolkowski had likely taken many times before. The sun was out. It was late morning. He was dressed for work. A black Chicago Cubs t-shirt, black pants, black sneakers. He helped his little brother take out the trash, then stepped outside to meet a coworker for a ride. It was a normal Wednesday, June 13th, 2001. He never came back. That walk, a quiet route through a quiet Omaha neighborhood, has since become a ghost path. People still drive it. Kids still ride bikes there. Families still take their dogs for walks. But for Jason's family, it's sacred ground. It's the place where time stopped. There were no cameras, no screams, no body, no clues. Just a teenager, almost 20, who disappeared without a trace in the heart of a city, during daylight, in a neighborhood full of front porches and sidewalks. The case remains one of the most baffling in Nebraska history. In the years since, Jason's photo has been shared in newspaper articles, on television screens, on missing persons websites, and digital age-progressed posters showing what he might look like in his 30s and now 40s. But the original image, his high school photo, remains the most widely seen. A clean-cut young man with a gentle smile and eyes that still seem to ask, "Why hasn't anyone found me?" His parents, Jim and Kelly Jolkowski, have never stopped asking the same question. They turned their grief into advocacy. They created Project Jason, a nonprofit that has supported hundreds of families. They pushed for legal reform. They helped pass Jason's law. They've spoken at national conferences. They've sat across from reporters and investigators, telling and retelling the same story. Not because they want to, but because they have to. Over 24 years have passed. Jason would be 43 years old in 2025. In that time, classmates have married, started careers, had children. And Jason is still frozen in time, still missing, still 19. And yet, his name continues to resonate. His case has been included in national databases on America's Most Wanted, in legislation, and in advocacy work that has saved others from falling through the same cracks. He is, in many ways, the reason hundreds of other families now receive faster, more serious responses when they report someone missing. But none of that has answered the most important question. What happened to Jason Jolkowski? There have been tips, false sightings, cruel hoaxes, but no verified lead has ever brought Jason home. No one has ever been arrested. No motive has been confirmed. No evidence has ever been found. And still, his family keeps walking. Not the path Jason vanished on, but the one that began in its place. A walk through bureaucracy, silence, and pain. A walk to raise awareness, fight for justice, and make sure Jason's story never fades. Today, his face remains on digital posters. His name continues to appear on missing persons registries. His story is told at vigils, in classrooms and online, not as a solved case or a cautionary tale, but as a question still waiting for an answer. Because someone somewhere knows something. Maybe it was a driver who passed by, a neighbor who heard something but didn't think it mattered. Maybe it was a stranger who never came forward, or someone who saw him and chose silence. 24 years is a long time, but not long enough to forget. The sidewalk Jason walked on is still there. The space between the front door and the school is still there. And so is the hope, fragile, flickering, but still burning, that one day the truth will come out. Do you believe someone out there still knows what happened to Jason? Like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to help bring awareness to Jason Jolkowski's story. Comment justice for Jason below.